What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you an update of sorts, I suppose, to my initial second look at Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. So typically when I review older games, what I do is a first impressions video, and then of course the review when I'm actually done. But in the case of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, that's a little strange for two reasons. One, I've played the game pretty extensively, so I'm well past first impressions at this point, but also I've covered it on the channel before. As a review, that is, anyway. However, that was quite a few years ago, I believe, right around 2021, the beginning of 2022, somewhere in there, which, for those who are unaware, is basically right when I started doing YouTube full-time as a job. And as with anything, when you step into a new role, there's a bit of a learning curve to it. You're kind of figuring things out for yourself, what you can do, what works, what doesn't, that kind of thing. And as a result, some of those videos from around that time I don't personally think are very good. And unfortunately, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines is among those. I kind of hate that review, if I'm being honest. And you combine that with the fact that we've got Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 releasing next month in October, it made sense, of course, to actually revisit this game for an updated look, both for myself, obviously, but also for other people who are actually watching the videos, mind you. And while we are technically a little bit early here, that is for a reason, for the next roughly week or so, week and a half, give or take, it's kind of a little on the slow side, because while September is extremely busy, as a whole, most of the games I want to cover from here, or at least as full reviews anyway, are dropping towards the end of the month. With Trails of the Sky first chapter on the 19th, Final Fantasy Tactics on the 30th, and then whenever Temple of Evil winds up releasing, they don't have a hard release date for that yet. But basically, I've got some time, and so it makes sense to finally jump into this, play through it for my own enjoyment, gather the footage while I'm at it, and of course, finally get around to updating that review. But I am still going to be making some small changes here and there, and the main one of those is, of course, revolving around the unofficial patch. So probably the very first thing pretty much anybody will tell you about Bloodlines is that you're going to want the unofficial patch. There's a few different ways to get it, and the content therein is also a little variable. And that's where a lot of the changes I want to mention come from specifically. Now, if you happen to buy Bloodlines over on GOG, it actually comes with a version of the unofficial patch just kind of baked in, which is the version 11.1 of the basic patch. That's worth mentioning because even if the basic patch is the only thing you want, it is actually a little bit out of date. The current version is, I believe, 11.5. But the basic patch is typically what people are referring to when they talk about this patch, because all it does is essentially fix all of the major bugs and tries to restore the game to more or less as it was intended, or at least as it was intended in terms of its actual release. An option when you go to install this, however, is the Plus patch. The Plus patch is a bit different. It basically has all those fixes and things, yes, but it also drastically alters the game in some ways. Some ways that some people would consider, not intended. It alters things like game balance, restores cut content. Much of that cut content over the years was initially pretty rough, and then just over time it got something akin to a more professional approach, but even that stuff has seen iterations, and what that stuff is basically just guesswork on what the original intent of that unused stuff actually was. So there's, frankly, some back and forth there. Now, for this second look, for me, I'm planning on using the Plus patch. I've played the game extensively without using it. I've played through it a few times with it, but not enough to really be super familiar with every little change, mind you. And so, frankly, I think this whole process will be more fun for me specifically if I pick up the Plus patch and actually decide to use it that way. But either way, you want to split it. This is a pretty big game if you actually want to hit all of the highlights. One thing Bloodlines does extremely well is short but replayable, and I think the Plus patch really adds on to that, with all of its changes and everything that can make each individual clan you play even more unique. Now, very broadly, for most people, I would say play through the basic patch first before you go worrying about the Plus patch, and then on top of that, I would not play Malkavian or Nosferatu first. Those really are better suited for second or third playthroughs. Personally, my favorite clan to play here has always been the Tremere. I just like their abilities and how they're implemented in this game the most, but with 7 to choose from, you can have plenty of unique playthroughs. Each of them comes with unique disciplines and things, basically the vampiric powers to actually use their blood points on. There's a little bit of overlap here and there, but nonetheless still pretty fun. I would honestly recommend Toreador if you want to go for a first playthrough. They've always been kind of like the basic default vampire in my eyes, and they fit what this game is going for extremely well. Whereas Nosferatu plays so differently from the rest of the game because you have to utilize the sewers and stay out of sight because you are a walking masquerade violation. It's definitely not the normal experience. And then on top of that, Malkavians, while very well loved for how they were depicted in this game, come with a slight issue in the sense that a lot of their dialogue and stuff can just be straight up spoilers because a lot of it has like this sort of gaze into the future aspect of it. And I think a lot of that stuff is better suited for, like a second or third playthrough at least. But all of that and plenty of more is the kind of nuance that I'm hoping to capture in an updated review of this game that I think the original video I made for it did not do a good job of capturing, frankly. Because one thing I really love about Bloodlines, and I think a large part of what has made it such a cult classic over the years, and another thing I want that review to dive into is actually a little bit of a history lesson for the game. Maybe not like a full and total thing, but still just to kind of explain and outline some of the basics. But either way, one of the reasons I think this game really blew up eventually is that it has just so much in terms of like little details from the clans you're playing to how dialogue's presented, things like that. And while some of it can certainly be a little janky and awkward due to the time it was made, it's still a lot of fun to engage with. In fact, one of my favorite things about this game is all the subtle things that are easy to miss, such as how dialogue changes based on the information your character actually has in a given moment. Like, for instance, in order to turn Heather into a ghoul right at the beginning of the game to, become your servant later, you have to know that that's possible. You have to basically learn about somebody being a ghoul from Mercurio, just as an example, and that's obviously excluding things like all the differing clan dialogue and how they play. But even beyond more like writing and roleplay systems there, another favorite thing of mine about this game is actually how it handles things like progression and how things like the experience numbers and everything stay very grounded and easy to read. Because while you have a ton of different things you could put points into, more often than not, completing quests and objectives just grants like, 1, 2, 3 XP, that kind of thing, and then you spend a relatively small amount on upgrading all of your various abilities. And it is a much more condensed version of what tend to be much larger numbers in other games that kind of get to a point where they are mostly meaningless in their implementation anyway. But broad strokes, simply put, I want to update that very old review of mine for this game to something that I think is more representative of what that game deserves ahead of the release of the second one, so obviously I can capture some of that interest at the same time, to be clear. But if I'm being real honest, I'm mostly doing this for me. I would like to play through Bloodlines 1 and get a bit of a refresher myself, and because of that, I'm not really giving myself much of a timeline on this one. There's a lot that I want to get into that review, and while I have played the game a lot previously, so I know exactly what I'm looking for in some sense, I certainly plan on enjoying the ride at the same time, and so I'm not really sure on a rough timeline just yet. Now that's pretty much going to do it for this video, but kind of to that end, mind you, if there's anything in particular you want to know about in that review, by all means drop it down in the comment section below, and I will certainly keep it in mind as I start making some moves here. But nonetheless, that is pretty much where I'm going to wrap it up today. So certainly hope you enjoyed all that. If you're looking forward to the updated review, by all means, like, comment, subscribe, stick around. I'll obviously be covering this and Bloodlines 2 over the course of the next month and a half, give or take. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.